Hello everyone, and I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing latest and everything Telltale games, Transformers, and more. And now, today, we are going to be starting our review of Transformers Cyberverse's third season, which I cannot believe how insane this season premiere was. So we don't have just one episode to cover, we don't just have two, not three, but 4 episodes of Transformers Cyberverse that we're going to be covering in this review video. So we're going to be covering the first 4 videos, or the first 4 episodes of Transformers Cyberverse Season 3, which oddly, for some reason, Hasbro decided to rebrand Cyberverse during this time and call the show instead Transformers Bumblebee, and then just have the subtitle of the season be called Cyberverse Adventures. But just to make it more simplified, I'm just going to keep calling it Transformers Cyberverse. So this is going to be my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 3, Episodes 1 through 4, Battle for Cybertron, Parts 1 through 4. And honestly, there's one thing I gotta say when in regards to this series of 4 episodes. Why wasn't this the Season 2 finale? With the way this is set up, it seems like it was 100% planned to be the Season 2 finale. Now, I don't know if this was the plan, but just some things caused the show to be caused the season to these episodes to be pushed forward to Season 3, because I was looking through like the release history. These episodes were released on the same day in early March of 2020, now it's almost 2 years ago since we're now in 2022, but yeah, this came out in March 2020 right before COVID hit. So clearly it wasn't COVID that was an issue that caused these episodes to be delayed. If that was the case, then yeah, I can understand why they were pushed to Season 3. But since it wasn't COVID, why weren't these episodes the Season 2 finale? I think Season 2 would have been a lot better off if this was the final 4 episodes of Season 2 instead of it being the first 4 of Season 3. Because, well, don't get me wrong, I definitely think this makes it a very strong first impression for Season 3. But honestly, I feel like if this was the final 4 episodes of Season 2, it would have made up for the horrible season finale that was the Crossroads in Season 2. But honestly, the Battle for Cybertron Parts 1 through 4, I thought Bad Moon Rising was my favorite episode. Then I thought, what was it? Not I Am the AllSpark. Yeah, I thought Bad Moon Rising was my favorite episode of Cyberverse. But no, these 4 episodes, mostly though, it was episode 3. I think episodes 3 and 4 were my favorites. I mean, they're all great, honestly. But probably my favorites are episodes 3, parts 3 and 4. This was just so good. So we're going to go ahead and see everything these episodes did right and what they did wrong, starting with episode 1, The Battle for Cybertron, part 1. So before this, I was already halfway through this review when I realized I totally forgot to talk about the new theme song that is played in this season. So unlike other Transformers shows where maybe the theme song changes completely, with Cyberverse, the intro sequence mostly stays the same throughout seasons, with the exception of one section to being different between seasons. In Season 1, this is when the AllSpark opens and it shows Bumblebee flashing through all his memories, showing the memories of Starscream and Grimlock, and then shows like Optimus, Bumblebee, and Windblade all transforming and going to the side. In Season 2, this was replaced with Starscream getting his AllSpark armor and being surrounded by Cheetor, RC, Hot Rod, Grimlock, and Wheeljack, who are all major characters in Season 2. Now for Season 3, instead, when the AllSpark opens, we have Optimus and Megatron standing side to side with a big black figure behind them, which vaguely resembles a Quintessence. And again, I do know that Quintessence are going to be a major antagonist in Season 3, so I'm sure this is probably just like a way to tease the fact that Quintessence were going to be in Season 3, but I don't know when they'll be showing up, because they don't show up in these 4 episodes. Maybe it will be in the next episode, but that's not even the most important part of this. So we have Optimus, Megatron, and the Quintessence in the background, but we also have 3 other characters. We have Clobber, of all characters, who I was totally not expecting, considering she was a rather minor character in Season 2. A new Decepticon we can see to the left of her, who's got like this red and black design with a golden battle mask. And then we see Hot Rod under Optimus here to the right of Clobber, but instead of his usual red and yellow design, Hot Rod's sporting a total black paint job this time with his flames. And I gotta say, I mentioned this back in my review of Wiped Out in Season 2. I love it when Transformers characters get like different paint jobs as the season goes on. And so I gotta say, I'm absolutely in love with Hot Rod's black paint job, and he doesn't get it in these episodes. And I gotta say though, it does kind of act as a spoiler for later on in this 4-part event, which I'm gonna dock some points off. But honestly, I'm not too upset with it because I'm really excited for Black Paint Hot Rod and see how he looks in that design. But so I'm really excited to jump into that. But other than that, the intro is pretty much the same, except for at the end where it shows the destroyed Cybertron and it just cuts to the Transformers Cyberverse logo. The logo is instead replaced with the new logo, which is just Transformers Bumblebee Cyberverse Adventures, and you just have Bumblebee on top of it, which again, I'm not too fond of the name change, but I'm still going to call it Cyberverse, so it doesn't really matter in the long run. So part 1 of this 4-part episode event starts with essentially all of the Autobots finally arriving at Cybertron after they escaped from Unspace at the end of Season 2. We see Windblade and Jetfire just looking over the dead Cybertron as Optimus just gives a monologue basically summarizing everything that happened in the last 2 episodes of Season 2 where he and the rest of the Autobots were going through space trying to make their way back to the Ark. Make their way back to Cybertron. But of course, obviously, we know that the Decepticons have already been there since episode 13 of Season 2, back when Shockwave pretended to destroy the space bridge to trick the Autobots into believing they had to take the long way to Cybertron instead of just taking the space bridge. And as we saw back in the Season 2 finale, Chromia was already kidnapped by Megatron and was forced into sending a distress signal by Megatron and the rest of Decepticons so that the Autobots would basically be forced to head to Cybertron even quicker and most likely not be ready for an ambush by Decepticons. So that kind of sets us up to where we pick up this episode, where we start off, of course, with, as I say, with Windblade and Jetfire looking over Cybertron and basically just reporting back to Optimus saying that there's no Decepticons, which seems to be a little bit odd considering that they literally just got a message from Chromia back in Season 2 that stated that, oh, they're under attack by the Decepticons, so did they just think she was making it up, or I don't get that. But anyway, we cut back after that to Chromia, who is captured under the Well of AllSparks with Perceptor, who we haven't seen since episode 1 of Season 1. Now think about it, it's been that long since we've seen Perceptor. The last time we saw him in a flashback where Windblade explained that he had sent, that he was the one who sent Windblade to Earth through the space bridge on Cybertron to try and find Bumblebee. And this is our first time seeing him since the very first episode of Cyberverse, and it's great to see Perceptor be his own character for once, and I gotta say, I'm really surprised by his voice actor. So, for those who know, Perceptor, just like Jetfire and Bumblebee, is actually voiced by Jeremy Levy once again, and I gotta say, kudos to Jeremy Levy, man. You're voicing not only 1, not only 2, but 3 main characters in Cyberverse. I know, of course, you do a great job as Rack and Ruin as well, but to have such, like, different takes on 3 separate main characters throughout this whole show. We had Bumblebee in seasons 1 and 2, who just, obviously, you did a great job as that. Then Jetfire in season 2, who's such a radical departure from his Bumblebee voice that, honestly, I fell in love with Cyberverse Jetfire. And now Perceptor is a lot more, like, cold and analytical, but there are hints of Jeremy Levy's Jetfire voice in his Perceptor voice, but honestly, I really, really dig Jeremy Levy's performance as Perceptor. So essentially, Perceptor is chastising Chromia for giving in to Megatron's demands to send the fake distress signal to the Autobots because Megatron was essentially threatening Chromia to do it, otherwise he would kill Perceptor. So Perceptor just wanted to be a martyr for the Autobots, but Chromia wouldn't let him. So instead, Perceptor decided to try and break her and him out of their prison cell in a very unique way, and that's by having Perceptor he has the monocle in his eye just like his IDW counterpart. He basically splits up into 3 refracting lenses that basically bends the light in the electric bars that they're in the cell that are trapped in to basically redirect them to Chromia and Perceptor's restraints and therefore freeing them. But in the process, that overloads Perceptor's eyes to the point where they actually explode and blind him, which I was super, super surprised by, that they just so brutally just showed that, where Perceptor's eyes are blown out, his sockets are totally empty, you got like total like burn marks over where his eyes would be, and like it's kind of weird considering just how Perceptor just shrugs off just being blind, even though Chromia seems to be horrified at his fact, but Perceptor just seems not to be bothered by the fact that he's blind at all. So I'm really interested to see if Perceptor is going to stay blind throughout the remainder of this season, or if perhaps he'll have got them fixed up by the end of this by the end of this arc. I know this is like the only episode where Perceptor actually shows up in this 4-part event, but who knows, maybe in episode 5 he'll show up again and has his eyes fixed, but who knows. Anyway, now that he's blind, it's up to Chromia to lead the two of them out of the prison cell, skipping past a few Decepticons as they do. But as they go, Chromia's not sure how to get through, considering that Cybertron is falling apart, and so a lot of the hallways are all destroyed. But Perceptor isn't completely blind, as he's able to use the little magnifying glass on his shoulder as sort of like a thermal tracker or like energon sensor. So he uses it to track several energon veins throughout the walls that Chromia and Perceptor decide to try and escape. As they're escaping, though, they do end up getting caught by a few Decepticon troops, so Perceptor offers to hold them off while Chromia runs to try and warn Windblade and the other Autobots. So this is something that does kind of bother me, and it's how Perceptor gets captured. When we see Chromia run away as Perceptor battles the 3 Decepticons that were stopping the 2 of them escaping, Perceptor, despite being blind, takes down 2 of them with ease, and yet the only 3rd one gets captured. The 3rd one only gets a jump on Perceptor because he just decides, for whatever reason, just stop fighting them and watch Chromia leave for a solid 10 seconds before that Decepticon shoots him in the back and captures him again. So, I don't know if they just need this as an excuse to get Perceptor captured again, but I don't know, to me it was just a little bit weak in my opinion. So while Chromia is still making her way out to Cybertron to try and find the Ark, we cut back to the Ark where we see Windblade, Cheetor, Hot Rod, and Bumblebee looking over a map of Cybertron. They realize that the Decepticons had taken over Iacon City, and Bumblebee is just in total shock by the disarray that Iacon is in, thinking that there's no hope of restoring Cybertron now, which I'm a little bit concerned by, because of course Cheetor does mention that they have the power of the AllSpark that can fix anything. Why is Bumblebee upset about this? Because he's seen all the Deus Ex Machina crap that the AllSpark has done throughout Season 2, and even Cheetor lists off all the stuff it does. It mentions how they fixed the plan with all the Sharkticons on it back in Wiped Out. It mentions how it fixed the Ark back in Escape from Earth. And it mentions how it revived Croaton back in Ghost Town. So why is Bumblebee so upset thinking that they're not going to be able to restore Cybertron just because Iacon's in shambles? Like, dude, you literally have the most annoying Deus Ex Machina in existence with the AllSpark. I'm pretty sure you're good. But anyway, after Cheetor reassures Bumblebee that things are going to be okay, we kind of get a last goodbye moment with all the Autobots, where Hot Rod basically just talks to all the different Autobots asking what they're going to do. He tells the Grimlock how he's going to throw a big victory party, similar to how he did in Party Down last season. RC mentions how she's going to drop off all her souvenirs she collected on Earth, as we saw back in, I believe it was The Visitor, when she was showing Bumblebee all the pictures she took of different animals on Earth. But then the real thing here comes when Hot Rod goes to see Drift, who for some reason has red eyes, and says that he wants to do something with Hot Rod that he's been wanting to do for a very long time. And I was a little bit concerned by this, and again, this is honestly the biggest problem I have with this 4 episodes in my opinion, but I'll get back to that in episode 3 when this comes back. Anyway, once Hot Rod just talks to them all and the Autobots are getting ready to take the Ark down to Cybertron, we cut back to the end of this episode where Chromia has finally arrived outside of Iacon on the surface, ready to warn all the Autobots of what's going to happen. But as she's about to, she gets cornered by Megatron and all the other Seekers, basically capturing her and trying to stop her from getting to the Ark. But the Ark's already here, so Megatron has Shockwave presumably set up a big snare trap, and I thought it was it's just going to cage the Ark, maybe pulling a tractor beam. But no, this snare just slowly closes in and totally destroys the Ark. No AllSpark to save it this time. It just gets shredded to pieces and explodes, presumably killing everyone on board, and Chromia can only just watch in horror as she literally just watches all the Autobots die. But of course, we know this is the end, but it does mark the end of episode 1. So just right off, I'm going to go ahead and give episode 1 probably an 8.5 out of 10. In my opinion, it's the weakest of all 4 of the episodes, but it's not a bad episode. Anyway, now we're going to go ahead and jump into episode 2, The Battle for Cybertron Part 2. Episode 2 now starts off basically a little bit after episode 1 ended, with Megatron basically just giving orders to Decepticons, now presumably believing that all the Autobots are dead. So, interestingly enough, Megatron commands Skywarp to go ahead and search the wreckage for any Autobot survivors, though we don't actually see Skywarp at all in this episode. We hear Megatron refer to someone by the name of Skywarp, but we never see them, and I know from other stuff that apparently in Cyberverse, Skywarp is a femme instead of a mech like he usually is in other Transformers continuities. But it's interesting considering that Skywarp was here with Megatron instead of on Earth with Starscream and Thundercracker. And as we know, back in I Am the AllSpark, Megatron, Starscream killed Thundercracker, Novastorm, and pretty much every other Seeker when he merged with the AllSpark. But for some reason, there are a few Seekers still alive on Cybertron, for some reason. But anyway, I'm just surprised by why we didn't get a proper look at Skywarp, even since she doesn't show up at all this episode. But anyway, before she can even do that, Megatron is shocked to find that basically all the Autobots plus Optimus are already outside the well of AllSparks, just ready to fight Megatron. And here's where we learn exactly how the Autobots survived. And basically, Optimus just knew that Megatron was going to try something to destroy the Ark. So he already knew that the Ark was going to go boom and just basically task all the Autobots with evacuating the ship. So eventually, this is interesting, Optimus goes to see Hot Rod before they evacuate the ship and tells him that he needs to know how to become a good leader, because there will be the time when he needs to be a leader. And as he states here that what he planned to do is to have Bumblebee and Hot Rod and Cheetor essentially be like a little stealth team to basically keep the AllSpark protected while all the Autobots fight the Decepticons. Well, all the other Autobots, fight the Decepticons. And so while they're fighting, Hot Rod will lead Bumblebee and Cheetor into the well of AllSparks, unbeknownst to Megatron's forces, to try and sneak the AllSpark into the well. So, honestly, this reminds me a lot back of, I believe it was Escape from Earth, when Hot Rod briefly took over the Autobots after Optimus went into a coma after events of I Am the AllSpark. And I really wish we got more of this build-up, because I'm not gonna lie, it is cool seeing that we get a direct reference to Optimus wanting Hot Rod to become a leader, essentially become that Rodimus type figure. But again, I wish this was alluded to a bit more in Season 2. Not too much of a con, just something I noticed in my opinion, that was just stuck out a little bit odd to me. So after we get that little explanation of how the Autobots ended up surviving the Ark being destroyed, we get into what I believe is, I didn't think that Boulder Media could top the amazing intro fight that we had throughout the entirety of Episode 1 of Season 2, Sea of Tranquility. But man, the fight here, and especially in the first half of Episode 3 next, this huge all-out war between the Autobots and Decepticons in this episode is without a doubt the best big large-scale battle we have ever seen in Cyberverse. And I am so glad that Boulder Media learned from their mistakes they did all the way back in Season 1, where we had AllSpark and the fight was just so nonchalant and it just didn't feel like any of the real stakes. That is totally thrown out the window in this. It almost feels like with these 4 episodes of Cyberverse, it's a completely different show than Season 1 was. Like, honestly, talk about like mood whiplash, because this is like honestly such a huge drastic change in tone from Season 1 of the show, and even like the early episodes of Season 2, where it's just this whole fight is just so brutal. Like, there's not even like really much music going on, we hear like Worf sounds, all the Autobots and Decepticons fighting each other. And I'm not gonna go too much into it, I'm only gonna talk about like brief highlights. I remember like there were some parts where RC's battling Skybites, and she's right on top of him, like punch him in the nose like an actual shark. We also get to see a few more Autobots and Decepticons be introduced in this. We have this one point where I believe it's Grimlock, he's battling Soundwave or someone, if I remember correctly. But then while he's battling Soundwave, another Decepticon goes to nowhere who vaguely resembles Strika from the IDW comics, and she ends up battling Grimlock to the point where she actually defeats him, which I was really surprised by, considering how seemingly Boulder Media was so anal on making sure Grimlock was super OP back in Season 2, where literally he was saving everyone in Season 2. And now that someone's actually beaten Grimlock, I'm finding that such a relief that Grimlock isn't just this unbeatable beast in terms of combat. And not even that, we get a bunch of new Autobots introduced too. We have this one point where Cup, of all characters, who we've never seen before in Season 1 and 2, actually Cup looks straight like his G1 and IEW appearances, comes out, battles a few Decepticons, and then before he gets tackled by, I believe it's either just a random Decepticon or maybe Shadow Striker or someone else. But as he's battling these Autobots, he gets saved by Whirl! Actually, Whirl from the IEW comics. His design looks straight up from More Than Meets the Eye, and saves Cup from, and he's even got his helicopter alt mode like Mortal Meets the Eye Whirl, and I really hope we see more of Whirl in this season. I knew that Whirl was going to show up in season 3 from just out of context clips, but I don't know if he's a major character in season 3. I really hope that he's going to be a major character, because Whirl was one of my favorite characters in the Mortal Meets the Eye comics and Lost Light, so I really can't wait to see that we're actually getting more IDW characters, like with Drift, Whirl. I know Cup isn't really an IEW character, but his design is really similar to IEW. So, man, I'm just absolutely loving how all these characters come together, just absolutely fighting each other. It just feels so, it actually feels like a real war. There's like stakes here, and I love it. A really interesting thing here comes out, though, where during all this chaos, we just see Bumblebee, Cheetor, and Hot Rod watching the whole fight, like, on this nearby ridge, where Bumblebee's just clearly anxious about the fight, and it doesn't feel right just having them stay out of it and just guard the AllSpark while they wait for Windblade to find a different route into the Well of AllSparks. But Hot Rod puts his foot down, basically just reaffirms that they need to stay here and wait for a signal from Windblade, as that was the plan Optimus told him to, though Bumblebee seems to not be into it as much as he and Cheetor are. And that changes when Ratchet is seen tending to an Autobot, and then I think it's Shockwave or Skybite that tries to attack. No, maybe it was Clobber. It was either Lockdown, Clobber, or Skybite that tries attacking Ratchet. Again, I'm so sorry if I for getting this wrong. I binged all 4 of these episodes, and I'm just trying to remember it all. So one of them attacks Ratchet and ends up and tries to stop him, but he ends up putting down a force field to stop him from attacking. Though Soundwave comes out of nowhere and then uses a Soundwave attack to destroy the force field and expose Ratchet. And just as Soundwave's about to go ahead and kill Ratchet, Bumblebee's had enough of it and tries to go ahead and jump down to help Ratchet. But we get a very brief fight between Hot Rod and Bumblebee. And I say fight in the loosest of terms, considering it's more so just Hot Rod struggling with Bumblebee, just trying to push him back away from getting involved in the fight with Ratchet. But luckily, Grimlock comes out of nowhere and manages to save Ratchet from Soundwave, so Bumblebee decides not to jump in at all. So I'm really happy that Hot Rod is taking on like this leadership role a lot. And again, totally random, but this whole bit with Hot Rod becoming this reluctant leader and just knows what he has to do, it honestly reminds me a lot, for any of you Naruto fans. I'm only saying this just because I've been rewatching Naruto for the first time in like 15 years. It reminds me a lot of the Sasuke recovery arc with Shikamaru leading Naruto, Choji, Neji, and everyone else to get it. This whole story with Hot Rod reminds me a lot that just Hot Rod is Shikamaru in this situation and Bumblebee is Naruto. That's exactly how I feel in this situation, and honestly, I love it. But anyway, the episode ends with our first major death of the season, and that is where Optimus and Megatron are fighting each other in the middle of the whole conflict. They're going at each other really roughly, which something I haven't seen since back in Transformers Prime. I think it was with season 1 episode 23 or 24. It's the one where after Megatron nearly killed Raph, and so Optimus got the last straw and just gets into that big fight with Megatron at the volcano, where he basically just curb stomps him with the wheels built into his heel. And that's it's not as brutal as that episode, but it's almost 75% of that brutality, really, in my opinion. We don't see super bad battle damage between Optimus and Megatron, but it still really feels like their punches have weight to each other. But anyway, Megatron and Optimus are just currently locked in a power struggle, and Shadow Striker has a clear shot on Optimus, getting ready to fire at him and kill him. But at the last second, Prowl drives through and jumps in the way of Shadow Striker's shot, taking it in the chest and killing him, which is very similar to how Prowl actually died in the G1 movie, where Starscream shot him in nearly the exact same area in the chest in the original G1 movie, which I thought was a nice little callback to that. And also, it's a nice little callback even to season 1 of Cyberverse, where we saw that, I think it was in episode 13, which was Matrix of Leadership, when Optimus had saved Hot Rod from nearly dying. This time, now it's not Optimus saving Hot Rod. Optimus saved Prowl from nearly dying. This time it's Prowl returning the favor of saving Optimus from being killed by Shadow Striker, so he takes the bullet for Optimus. And even Shadow Striker seems to be almost distraught by Prowl sacrificing himself, which is also again a nice little callback to Parlay from season 2, where we saw there was a brief little friendship between Prowl and Shadow Striker. So it's almost as if despite their feud on being both Autobots and Decepticons, Shadow Striker did have a genuine, like, admiration or respect for Prowl. So it's nice to see that, like, even as Optimus just is basically like, cradling Prowl as he dies. Now, I saw that, now in the episode, Optimus just, it doesn't seem like Prowl dies, and Optimus even says to tell Prowl to hold on. But from what I read about this, Prowl doesn't show up again in Season 3 or 4, so that pretty much confirms that Prowl did die during events of Season 3. And that's something that I've kind of seen with a lot of deaths throughout this season and Season 2. Character deaths are just super obscure for some reason. Like with Thundercracker and the rest of the Seekers back in I Am the AllSpark, it wasn't really clear if they died or not. The only clear death that was in Season 2 was Slipstream. That was really the only clear death we had in Season 2. But anyway, after Prowl dies, Optimus goes back to battling Megatron. Though while he's doing this, Shockwave is inside the AllSpark, who receives a message from Megatron saying to move forward with the next step of his plan, and that leads us directly into Episode 3, and oh boy, is Episode 3 a big one. If I had to rank Episode 2, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. A great episode after Part 1. The huge conflict with where we get to see literally every Autobot and Decepticon, even some new ones like Cup, Whirl, and Strika battle each other. I think that was just super cool, just to see all these characters that we've come to know and love throughout the past 2 seasons finally just get this huge big clash, even bigger than the one we had in Sea of Tranquility. Prowl's sacrifice and death was really cool, both like thematically and just cool, nice little callback to just Prowl's death in the G1 movie. Optimus Megatron's fight was great, and I even love Hot Rod becoming like this really cool leader, almost Rodimus type figure, and kind of shows like a strain in his relationship with Bumblebee. This see, even though considering how close they were back in Season 2, as we saw. So I'm really interested to see how this goes going forward. But now we move on to Episode 3, and honestly, this and Episode 4 are without a doubt my 2 favorite episodes in Cyberverse, and I didn't think anything could top Bad Moon Rising after the absolute beatdown that Megatron gave Starscream in that episode. But anyway, this episode is just absolutely bonkers in the most wonderful way. So basically, it's with Optimus ends up finally beats Megatron after their little struggle continued towards the end of Episode 2, where Optimus decides he's not going to waste time killing Megatron. He's just going to go head into the AllSparks and secure Vector Sigma, which the Decepticons had already moved from the Nemesis into the Well of AllSparks. But Megatron taunts Optimus, saying that he won't be able to stop it, as we see that Megatron has already used Vector Sigma to create an army of Scraplets, clearly taking a page out of Starscream's book. And Optimus sort of kind of gets PTSD from that, where we see a brief flashback to, I believe it was Episode 8, Starscream's Children, where we see Optimus basically getting devoured by all the Scraplets. And so I really like that Optimus actually has kind of a fear of Scraplets from that experience. So Optimus just backs away from them, informing Windblade that they need to find another way in. So while they're doing this, Windblade ends up trying to contact Chromia and Perceptor, who she finds out are still alive, thanks to Teletron X telling her that. So Windblade uses her speaker powers to reach out to Chromia to see if she can help her find an alternate way into the Well of AllSparks, with the main exit being blocked off by the Scraplets. So Chromia, knowing the Energon vein path tunnel route thing from Perceptor, it manages to take that information to Windblade, who then relays that information to Bumblebee, Hot Rod, and Cheetor. And this is where, honestly, the best part of this episode comes in. So after Hot Rod receives the message from Windblade telling them that they need to go into the Well of AllSparks through the alternate path through the Energon veins, he guides Cheetor and Bumblebee into it, where we see this like really dilapidated, foresty looking area of Iacon, where it's there are several like Energon acid tar pits that are scattered about that Bumblebee almost goes into, but Hot Rod stops him from going. As they're walking, they're suddenly interrupted by Drift, who is basically following them the entire time, though unbeknownst to Hot Rod and everyone. So Hot Rod, though, doesn't seem anything wrong with it, and tells Drift that they need to keep moving, and that to come along with him. So Drift just seems to be okay with that, until suddenly he pulls out a sword and attacks Hot Rod, who manages to block it with his exhaust pipes, and he's confused by why Drift is attacking Hot Rod, where we learn that Drift has actually been a double agent for the Decepticons this whole time. So that means all the way back in Season 1, where we saw that flashback of Bumblebee wanting to help Deadlock defect to the Autobots. Apparently, Drift was just pretending to defect, which I really don't understand considering why Megatron had come out there. I don't know if this is a big retcon or the Cyberverse writers just had this plan the whole time that Drift was going to be a double agent, which doesn't seem to be really fitting for Drift in my opinion, considering that Drift's whole story throughout every single incarnation of him, whether it be IDW Drift, Bayverse Drift, or even Robots in Disguise 2015 Drift, he's always started out as Decepticon Deadlock, but he's always stayed as a good Autobot named Drift. He's kind of like Jetfire in that regard. But to have just Drift just basically faking being an Autobot this whole time, I don't know, to me, it doesn't sit right with me, and honestly, that's the biggest con I have with this whole 4-episode event, is the fact that they decided to just, out of nowhere, seemingly, make Drift a double agent for Decepticons. I think this would have been a cool thing to do if they decided to throw Bludgeon in here instead, but the fact that it's Drift of all characters, that it turns out to be a double agent, that just bothers me a bit in my opinion. But anyway, as Drift struggles with Hot Rod orders Bumblebee and Cheetor to go on ahead, and while Hot Rod deals with Drift. And again, this is where my comparisons to Naruto come back into play, because literally I'm getting flashbacks again to the Sasuke recovery arc with Hot Rod battling Drift here. And I gotta say, Hot Rod and Drift's battle, despite how much I'm not a fan of the fact that they made Drift a double agent, I can't deny just how awesome this fight is, where we see Hot Rod and Drift like going at each other pretty equally. Hot Rod gets a few like flamethrower gouts in on Drift. Drift manages to get a few swipes in, nearly it's hitting Hot Rod. Though that seems the point where Hot Rod has the upper hand until he gets suddenly stabbed through the chest by Drift. And honestly, my jaw like dropped for a split second, thinking that they were actually going to kill Hot Rod off. And this is where the problem comes in. So Hot Rod gets stabbed through the chest by Drift. We don't actually see like the impact when we just see Drift pull the sword out, and then Hot Rod just clutching his chest as Drift seems he's ready to go ahead and finish off Drift. But Hot Rod states that knowing that he's gonna die soon, decides to do the ultimate G sacrifice move, where he grabs Drift and ends up pulling him with all his strength into one of the Energon tar pits, as just the two of them just get consumed by the tar. And honestly, if I didn't know from the intro that basically just spoils that Hot Rod is going to come back with the black paint job, I would have genuinely thought that Hot Rod would have totally just died right there with Drift. So with that, we get our second major death in the form of Drift being killed by Hot Rod, drowning in the Energon tar. And we know, obviously, it seems like Hot Rod does die as well, but we know from the intro again that Hot Rod does survive this. And damn, I really, really, really wish that wasn't the case. I wish we didn't have this intro, because if I did, I would have been super, super sure that Hot Rod would have died right there. And if so, that was a hell of a way for Hot Rod to go out. Kudos to Blur Media for making, like, honestly, Hot Rod's sacrifice is honestly, even I don't care if he doesn't actually die during that. Without a doubt, the best sacrifice / death that Cyberverse has ever done so far. So kudos to Cyberverse for making that so awesome. I guess we can say that's how maybe Hot Rod gets his black paint job, that maybe the tar stuck onto him, completely covering his red and yellow color scheme. So instead, he just has the black instead of the red and yellow. But we'll have to see when he comes back in later episodes, because he doesn't return in episode 4. I guess Hot Rod essentially just comes back later on. We'll see about that. But just when you think Hot Rod's death isn't the biggest part of this episode, we cut back to Bumblebee and Cheetor, who have already gone way ahead of Hot Rod and Drift, and they are now in this big jungle area. And so Bumblebee's just taking in the sights, thinking that it's so beautiful and that Hot Rod would love to see it. So he decides to go ahead and call Hot Rod and see what's going on. But of course, since Hot Rod has been drowned in the tar, Bumblebee doesn't know that Hot Rod's dead, or presumably dead. And so Bumblebee just gets more and more worried that when Hot Rod's not responding, when he finally realizes that Hot Rod's comm is offline, and therefore he is the big dead, presumably. And just the way Bumblebee's mood just totally drops throughout this episode. Man, like, honestly, shout out Jeremy Levy, man, that the way, first off, like, he's been absolutely killing his Bumblebee throughout this entire show. First in Season 1, when in Megatron's My Hero, when he basically just screams his lungs out as Megatron rips his voice box out. He did a great job as Jetfire in Season 2, and now, just the way he portrays Bumblebee just being totally broken after Hot Rod's presumable death. Honestly, it's just so good. Like, the way, like, because we've seen throughout the entirety of Season 2, this is how you do a character death, Cyberverse. And I know that Hot Rod's not dead, so that kind of annoys me, because part of me actually wishes that Hot Rod stayed dead, because this would have been perfect. But still, Bumblebee still thinks that Hot Rod's dead, and that's good enough for me. So the way that Bumblebee basically just thinks that, in all intents and purposes, Hot Rod was Bumblebee's brother, for a lack of better terms, and the fact that Hot Rod is presumably dead to Bumblebee, that just totally ruins him. So the point where Cheetor is totally shook by just even Bumblebee, who's been so happy and like doesn't let anything get to him throughout the entirety of Season 2, no matter how bad things got, just totally be broken by Hot Rod's supposed death. I think that is absolutely crazy how that we can see the side of Bumblebee, like a side that Bumblebee that actually feels hopeless in a situation. And it, again, if you were told me back in Season 1 of Cyberverse that we'd be going from Bumblebee doing, helping Windblade stop Starscream from messing up basically the Cybertron equivalent of a football game, to Hot Rod pulling a Choji and sacrificing himself to save Cheetor and Bumblebee, man, like, honestly, this is without a doubt, like, again, talk about tonal whiplash, because Cyberverse Season 3 is not the same show as Cyberverse Season 1, and I absolutely love it. But anyway, Cheetor keeps trying to cheer Bumblebee back up, but he's just not having any of it. He's totally ruined, the poor boy. And as he just sits down, he gets suddenly taken away by some unknown force. But don't worry, we'll see what happens to Bumblebee and who took him in the next episode. So Cheetor is just left confused, wondering where Bumblebee could have gone, when we cut back to the end of this episode, and that's back above in Iacon, where all the Autobots and Decepticons are still fighting each other. At this point, Teletran X talks to Windblade about wanting to get into Vector Sigma and end up destroying it so that Megatron can't use it to create any more Decepticons for him. So Windblade blasts a hole in like the roof of the big well of AllSparks for her and Teletran X to go through, and calls up Wheeljack asking if he can help them destroy it. And he's already Mission Impossible-ing his way up with these like magnet boots that he's got, just walking up the wall so nonchalantly. So while Windblade and Teletran X go ahead and get ready to destroy Vector Sigma, Bludgeon comes out of nowhere and presumably kills Teletran X here by slashing him nearly in half, though I really thought that Teletran X was going to die here, considering that the Ark was destroyed. But as we see as we'll see later on in Episode 4, Teletran X does in fact survive this, which I really thought they were going to kill Teletran X, considering we already lost Prowl, Drift, and presumably Hot Rod. So, but the way it basically just ends with Windblade and Bludgeon getting into a fight with each other, and I gotta say, this fight is so much better than Windblade and Bludgeon's fight back in Season 2. I believe it was in Episode 10, Secret Science. But I'll get back into that in my review of Episode 4, which we're going to get into right now. But for Episode 3, I have to go ahead and give this episode a 9.5 out of 10. I wish I could give it a 10 out of 10, but the fact that they made Drift of all characters the double agent for the Decepticons, that just doesn't sit right with me. Hot Rod's sacrifice was honestly one of the best points of Cyberverse as a whole. Bumblebee's reaction to Hot Rod's supposed death was great. Cheetor just feeling totally lost without Bumblebee or Hot Rod, it was great. Everything else was just so good this episode. So it was that good. So now that brings us to the finale of the Battle for Cybertron events with Episode 4, Battle for Cybertron Part 4. And boy, oh boy, this episode is honestly just as, if not a little bit better than Episode 3, and is without a doubt my favorite episode of Transformers Cyberverse of all time. So literally this episode starts off where Episode 3 left off with the Windblade versus Bludgeon fight. And I gotta say, Windblade versus the Bludgeon fight is so much better, because honestly, I was really expecting Wheeljack to just come ahead and save Windblade just like he did back in Secret Science, but thankfully no, Windblade actually manages to get back at Bludgeon and defeat him by snapping his sword in half and kicking him towards Vector Sigma, when Wheeljack comes out of nowhere and uses an Unspace gun, a gun that is basically merged with Unspace, and uses it on Vector Sigma to cause it to be absorbed in Unspace, and Windblade basically Sparta kicks Bludgeon into the orb of Unspace, trapping them both in, and they both get presumably disintegrated by Unspace. We don't see Bludgeon again, and I haven't looked up anything to see if Bludgeon does in fact die or not. So I'm just gonna say that Bludgeon did die. If he doesn't, I'll be sure to correct that. But now here's a problem that I have with this. So Windblade kicks Bludgeon in, and he presumably dies. So that means we can say that Bludgeon perhaps definitely was a Decepticon and not a mole for Starscream or the Quintessence or anyone else. So if that's the case, then why did he kill Slipstream back in Season 2? Because if he was so loyal to Megatron, did he just not trust the Autobots and thought that perhaps killing Slipstream was because maybe that was it? Maybe he just didn't trust the Autobots and was just looking for an excuse to break the treaty. So by basically killing Slipstream and framing it on the Autobots, attacking them first, that's how he could convince Megatron to not work with Optimus. Maybe that was the case. That's one thing that could maybe be a defense in terms of Bludgeon not being a double agent for some other third party. But then why did he kill all of the scraplets that they had in possession left over from Starscream? Because that was the whole thing, that Shadow Striker stated that Bludgeon was in charge of the scraplets looking for a weakness to them, but Bludgeon just so mercilessly kills them all. Why did he destroy their only thing that they were looking for a weakness for if he wasn't working with someone with the scraplets? That just doesn't, it seems really, really odd. And it's, again, just like with the whole thing with Drift being a double agent back in episode 3, this is my biggest con of this episode, but thankfully, it's not super big of a con, just a small thing in my opinion. I couldn't help myself, so I looked it up. Yeah, Bludgeon is the big dead. So the fact that Bludgeon just wasn't working for some third party, but just an extremely loyal Decepticon, it is a little bit weird considering, like, then why he decided to kill Slipstream back in Season 2 and kill all the scraplets. The fact that Bludgeon did all that and he just died off, presumably just not being a double agent, that was a little bit odd in my opinion. So after Windblade kills Bludgeon, we cut back to where we sort of ended episode 3 with Hot Rod and with Hot Rod's group. So after Hot Rod sacrificed himself to kill Drift, where we had Bumblebee being taken by that unknown force, we see Cheetor tracking Bumblebee down to be basically being spit roasted by these 4 little, like, small Cybertronian things, with the leader of them being called Repugnus. They plan to eat Bumblebee for his energon, but Cheetor states that they don't have to do that, and that by using the AllSpark to essentially, like, fill them all up with energon. So Repugnus basically just swears loyalty to Cheetor at this point, agreeing to show him where the AllSpark is. So after freeing Bumblebee, the two of them plus Repugnus and his minions show Cheetor and Bumblebee to, like, where the Well of AllSparks is. So the two of them head inside down to where the Well of AllSparks is, where Bumblebee states that he hasn't been there since he was essentially born by the AllSpark, where all of a sudden they're interrupted by Shockwave, who is there as well, and Shockwave states that he has no intention of letting Cheetor and Bumblebee restart Cybertron, so he sends an army of drones after Cheetor and Bumblebee to stall them. So Cheetor deals with all the small drones, while Shockwave transforms into his big drone form and battles with Bumblebee and Cheetor, to the point where I think it's like he takes down, Cheetor's charging at Shockwave, and Shockwave shoots at Cheetor, knocking him out, and Cheetor had, like, a spirit the whole time. Bumblebee ends up grabbing a spear, and this really cool move manages to knock out Shockwave by stabbing the spear right into the, like, muzzle of Shockwave's tank form in his spider drone form, and that is enough to destroy all the drones and knock Shockwave out. So with that time, Bumblebee gets Cheetor back up, and the two of them use the AllSpark to finally revive Cybertron, just as Optimus and Megatron are still finishing their fight up above on the surface of Cybertron. So while they're doing that, with Vector Sigma destroyed and the AllSparks starting to revive Cybertron, Megatron essentially decides to go do the ultimate toxic move of, if I can't have it, no one can. So he orders Shockwave to destroy the AllSpark presumably in a really, really dark way, and that is essentially, Shockwave essentially becomes a suicide bomber for the AllSpark. He takes his device that he has strapped to his chest, walks up to the AllSpark, and essentially the device basically rips out Shockwave's own spark and sends it back to the AllSpark. But somehow, Shockwave's managed to corrupt his spark, and therefore uses it to try and destroy the AllSpark. And this is where, honestly, the most shocking part of this entire series happens. This is, like, the most, honestly, this was legit. I was actually really, really sad watching this, and that is Cheetor sacrificing himself to save the AllSpark, which I totally did not expect to happen. And that is, so noticing that they don't have much time until Shockwave's spark, now that he killed himself to corrupt the AllSpark, destroys the AllSpark, Cheetor realizes he has to use his own AllSpark to purge Shockwave's spark and purge the AllSpark of Shockwave's influence. So after giving like a really sad goodbye to Bumblebee, where you can see Bumblebee just total anguish because he's lost both his friends. He's lost his brothers. He lost his big brother Hot Rod. He lost his little brother Cheetor. It just, oh my god, it's so sad. And oh my god, it's just honestly heartbreaking. Just like you can see the pain on Bumblebee's face as Cheetor straps the device to his chest and then just rips the spark out of him, and as his body just falls down as his spark goes into the AllSpark, and basically just, for lack of better terms, just kills Shockwave and fix and purges the AllSpark of all the corruption caused by Shockwave. Cheetor manages to revive the AllSpark and use it to properly revive Cybertron by reviving Cybertron with the AllSpark. And while he's there, Cheetor is now returned to the AllSpark because if you remember, Cheetor basically is the personification of the AllSpark and basically reassures Bumblebee that he'll always be with him. And honestly, though, it's such a sad end for Cheetor's character because Cheetor was such like he and Hot Rod were without doubt my favorite characters in Cyberverse. And Cheetor's death, it was honestly so sad. Like, honestly, it's not even funny. I literally just watched it for the first time maybe like an hour ago. It's 2 in the morning and I'm already upset because Cheetor. Oh my god, Cheetor, why?
Greetings! I am Cheetor, guardian of the AllSpark. My spark was chosen to be the guardian of the AllSpark. It is my duty to grant you both a chance to prove your worth.
I'm gonna go hide, and you have to track me down. Got it?
Got it! When shall we begin? Ah, the game is already afoot.
You have trained Cheetor well, Bumblebee. He will make a fine Autobot scout.
They are talking of making peace. You must be happy that the fighting will soon end.
Actually, they do this pretty often. Every couple thousand cycles or so. Yeah, and it always goes the same way. Right now, they're starting to argue. A lot.
You have no power over me so long as the AllSpark is near. I am the AllSpark.
You thinking what I'm thinking?
I do not know what you are thinking. It is glorious! What is it?
It's a solar waveboard. Slip out, catch some solar waves, and surf our way through this asteroid field. It's gonna be awesome!
But what about the Ark?
We'll be waiting for them on the other side.
Then I am ready for some awesome. Cheetor! No!
It is time for me to fulfill my duty as guardian of the AllSpark. Thank you for being my friend, Bumblebee.
No!
Wherever Bumblebee goes on Cybertron,
Cheetor will be with him.
His death was so, like, honestly, and I thought Hot Rod's death was the best one. No, Cheetor has without a doubt the best death in Cyberverse. So kudos to you, Boulder Media, for making such a beautiful moment. So sad, but so beautiful at the same time. And so Bumblebee is just watching as he's cradling Cheetor's dead body as the AllSpark revives all Cybertron. And just Megatron just tries to still stop Optimus, but Optimus kicks him into all the scraplets that he had, and they start devouring him. Now I would say that Megatron is dead as well, but we do know that Megatron will come back later on this season. So Megatron isn't quite dead just yet, even though the scraplets seem to be like that. And even Shadow Striker, though, seems to have defected to the Autobots now. She decides to go ahead and try to kill Optimus after he kicks Megatron into the scraplets, but eventually Optimus just seems like to give Shadow Striker a look and she just surrenders to him. So presumably we might get like a knockout situation where Shadow Striker ends up becoming like a honorary Autobot. That would be pretty cool to see, considering she's kind of been an antithesis to Bumblebee, and considering now that Cheetor is dead, maybe it would be cool to see like a cool little dynamic where Shadow Striker and Bumblebee become friends. But who knows, man. This was just such an incredible episode from start to finish. And I really, really wish this was the end of Season 2 instead, because this would have been so impactful as a Season 2 finale. And so that was my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 3, Episodes 1 through 4, The Battle for Cybertron, Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. As I said, I'd give Episode 1 an 8.5 out of 10. I'd give Episodes 2 and 3 a 9.5 out of 10. Episode 4, I would give a 9.9... No, you know what? That's not what Cheetor would want. I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10. No, I'm not gonna get it. I'm not gonna give it a 20 out of 10. I'm gonna give this episode a 100 out of 10. Not even Bludgeon's just whole... Because I can't blame Bludgeon's just killing Slipstream on this episode. I have to give the episode 4 a 100 out of 10. It is without a doubt so good. Episode 1 an 8.5 out of 10. Episode 2 a 9.5 out of 10, Episode 3 9.75 out of 10, and Episode 4 100 out of 10. And we've gotten so much good stuff this season. I mean, not this season, these 4 episodes. We got huge, amazing battles. We've gotten great character actions with Hot Rod talking to Bumblebee and Cheetor. Cheetor's sacrifice thanking Bumblebee for everything he's done for him throughout Season 2. We had Windblade finally getting revenge on Bludgeon for killing Slipstream. Not to mention how many deaths we've got in these 4 episodes alone. We got Prowl being killed in Episode 2. We got Hot Rod presumably dying, with definitely Drift dying in Episode 3. We got Bludgeon, Shockwave, and Cheetor all dying in Episode 4. Yeah, Bludgeon, Shockwave, and Cheetor all die in Episode 4 as well. So we got 6 major deaths in Cyberverse Season 3. Technically 5 if you don't count Hot Rod, but I'm just going to count that because that was pretty much a death, because Bumblebee doesn't know that Hot Rod's dead. The Hot Rod's not dead. So, again, I'm just... Wow, what an episode. Honestly, this episode was incredible. And if this was the end of Cyberverse, I would have totally been cool with this episode being the final episode of Cyberverse. You could totally just end the show right here and have Hot Rod still be dead, have Megatron actually have died. Though, again, that still kind of begs the question as to what happened to Starscream and Croaton. But, again... Honestly, an incredible start to Season 3, and I can't wait to see what Boulder Media's got planned for the remainder of the season, because it's 26 episodes long. It's not 18 like Seasons 1 and 2, it's 26 episodes, so I'm super excited to see where we go from here. So that's going to be it for this review, but also, I'm going to do something a little bit different with Cyberverse Season 3. So, unlike Seasons 1 and 2 of Transformers Cyberverse, every episode of Transformers Cyberverse Season 3 after the Battle of Cybertron was released in bunches of 2. So basically, 2 episodes were released every day, or every week, with basically each episode being a part 2 of sorts. They're not every episode's like part 1 and part 2. Some are, but not all of them are. But every episode, as I've seen, currently has basically 2 episodes released at once that basically tell a larger overall story. So my next review, we're going to be covering not just Episode 5 of Cyberverse Season 3, but also Episode 6. So be sure to check back in next time. We'll be reviewing Transformers Cyberverse Season 3, Episode 5, The Loop, and Episode 6, The Dead End. If you like this reviews and can't wait for me to review the rest of Season 3, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Take it away, Bumblebee.
Bumblebee out.
And I might know our future, but then you still control the past. Only you know if you